"I'm not clean," she whispered. And when the cloth fell, the human's heart stopped.
The plaza sat open to the night, quiet and exposed, lit by a few stubborn signs that blinked on and off without rhythm. A toppled kiosk lay on its side near the old transit terminal. Dust moved in thin sheets across broken tiles. The air tasted like old wiring and damp stone. Gale crossed the square with measured steps. He kept his shoulders loose, his arms free, his breathing steady. He was here for one job and then home. He had marked the terminal weeks earlier, after hearing a scrap merchant brag about sealed storage onto the concourse. The rumor matched a registry note he carried in his pocket. There should be a data cylinder beneath a maintenance plate near the eastern stairwell. If the seal was good, the contents could be worth a month of food and filters. He needed both. His work as an archivist paid in barter, and the last few runs had yielded only broken hardware and half-corrupted lists. He moved through the terminal mouth and paused. He scanned the space the way he had been trained to scan rooms he planned to sleep in. Corners first. The dark wedge under the collapsed footbridge. The shadow past the turnstiles. The ceiling with the concrete had cracked around a hanging light. No movement, no voice, no glass crunch that did not belong to him. He knelt by a buckled floor plate and slid a pry bar under the lip. The metal resisted. He adjusted his grip, pushed down, and lifted in short, controlled strokes. The plate gave with a loud, sharp snap. He froze and listened. Nothing answered the noise. He reached in and found the cylinder. It was cold, scratched, and heavy enough to feel real. A stamp tag read Manifest Archive 72. Good. He wiped it with the side of his hand and felt the quick relief that comes when a plan holds. A scrape sounded from the far end of the hall. Not a metal skid. Not a rat. Bare skin against stone. Light shifted near the broken turnstiles. A figure stepped out of the shadow. She stood barefoot, knees slightly bent, one shoulder braced against a post. A thin strip of cloth crossed her chest and wrapped around her hips. It had once been white. Now it was the color of dirty snow. Her skin was pale violet under the failing light. Old grime dulled it. Long silver hair fell in damp knots to the middle of her back. She kept her chin raised, but her mouth was tight with strain. She watched him the way a trapped person watches an open hand. Her voice came rough, as if it had not been used in days. "I'm not clean." Gale rose with slow precision and lifted his empty hands, palms out. He chose his words and tone as he would choose a route through a hostile ridge. "Are you hurt?" She flinched at his voice, but did not run. Her fingers tightened on the cloth. "Do not come closer." "I will not." He pointed with his chin to the cylinder on the floor. "I came for that. Then I leave." The tension in her shoulders changed. Not less. Different. She was looking for lies and angles in his face. He let her read him. Straight line. Even breathing. Clear hands. No hungry stare. "You need water?" he said. Something in her eyes gave a short flicker. She tried to hide it. He slid his pack off one shoulder, sat on the floor in front of him, and unzipped the top. He took out a small bottle and a ration bar. He pushed them toward her with his boot and stepped back 3 paces so she would not have to reach near his hands. She studied the bottle as if it were bait. Her stomach tightened under the cloth. She glanced up, checked his expression again, decided, and moved in quick, efficient steps. She snatched the bar and the water and retreated to the shadow of the post. The first bite was frantic. The second slowed. She drank in short pulls, careful and focused, like a person who had been punished for spilling. "Name," he said. Her body tightened again. "Why?" "So I can talk to you like a person." She looked down at the cloth, then back up at him. "Orina. Gale." She took the name in without comment. Her gaze drifted to his coat. It was dark, frayed at the cuffs, and mended in places with mismatched thread. She checked his boots. Utility grade. She checked the holster at his hip. Not a city issue. No insignia. She was building a profile to decide how to survive the next hour. Gale kept his own assessments simple and practical. She was hungry, dehydrated, and close to collapse. She had chosen to speak rather than run. That meant she had run out of places to go, or had decided the risk of talking to him was smaller than the risk of walking back into a night full of doors that did not open. He felt the old pressure of decision settle in his chest. He did not like leaving anyone in this state. He also did not bring strangers home. Tonight, he would make an exception and control the variables. A gust of air pushed through the terminal mouth and tugged at her hair. She adjusted the cloth higher with a quick, embarrassed motion. The knot at her hip loosened. The wrap slid. She caught it with one hand, but the knot gave. The cloth unrolled and fell to the floor with a flat sound, and there she was without cover. Her body went rigid. Her eyes widened, then hardened. She was waiting for disgust, or a leer, or a joke at her expense, or a demand dressed up as help. Gale felt a rush of heat and a clean, simple desire that hit his gut and climbed his spine. He liked the way she looked. He liked the lines of her hips and the long strength in her legs and the soft fullness of her chest that rose with her trapped breath and the faint path of old scrapes along her thighs and the hollow at the base of her throat. The feeling was not new. The honesty of it steadied him. He set it behind a door in his head and locked it because wanting did not equal taking. He shrugged out his coat in one motion and stepped forward slowly enough for her to refuse him. She did not move. He wrapped the coat around her shoulders and pulled the sides together, his hand flat against the fabric, so she felt pressure but not fingers. The coat hung to her calves and hid her from the hard light. She exhaled and shook once like a person coming back from a ledge. "I will not look if you tell me not to," he said, eyes on her face. "You already did," she said. Her voice had no accusation. It had fact. "Yes," he said. "I saw you. I am still here." Her posture shifted a few millimeters. It was not trust. It was the first fraction of it. He crouched, picked up the fallen cloth, folded it, and set it on top of his pack. He did not offer it back. The coat covered more and gave weight and warmth. He wanted her covered, not because her body bothered him, but because she deserved to choose when it showed. "I have a room 4 blocks from here," he said. "It locks. It is dry. You walk ahead. I stay back. If you run, I do not chase." "Why?" she asked, softer now. "You need shelter," he said. "I have shelter. That is the entire deal. That is never the entire deal. With me it is." She studied him with a care that came from long practice. She looked at the cylinder again. "You leave that. I come back for it. It can wait. People do not leave money on the ground. The ground is not moving." He lifted his pack, slung it over his shoulder, and pointed with his chin toward the square. "Your choice. If you say no, I walk out and do not turn back." She stood very still, then nodded once and stepped past him, the coat swaying around her legs. He followed at an angle that would make it hard for her to feel crowding. They crossed the plaza. Neon skimmed across puddles and shattered glass. A broken ad board whispered an offer for a product no one had seen in years. Aurinia checked the alleys with quick, jerky glances. Gale scanned too, but his pattern was even and complete. Roofline, fire escape, doors, windows, stoplight, move. They took a narrow stair under a dead sign. The steps were gritty. The handrail was gone. Gale used a battered card and a mechanical key to open a steel door. He stepped aside and held it while she entered. He followed and slid the bolt. The click was loud in the small room. His place was simple and clean. A low bed against one wall. A folding table with a small reader and a coil of cable. Shelves with labeled bins. A barrel stove with a sealed vent. A metal basin on a crate beside a coil-fed filter line. A single bulb in a wire cage that hummed as it warmed. A roll of sealed soap sheets hung from a nail. Aurinia stopped a few steps in and searched for traps. She looked at the bed first, and then the floor, as if choosing the lesser danger. She kept the coat closed with one hand and stood tall to reclaim some part of herself that the night had tried to take. Gale moved to the basin and opened the filter. Clean water flowed in a slow, steady thread. "Soap sheets," he said, holding the packet where she could see the seal. He set it on the crate and stepped away. "Use what you need. I will face the wall. If I wash, you will expect something," she said. "I expect only that you finish washing without anyone bothering you," he said. He turned to the wall and unbuckled his holster. He set the weapon on the table and moved a step away from it. He pulled a folded blanket from a bin and spread it on the floor near the stove for himself. He had not looked back at her. Water sloshed into the basin. The packet crackled. Fabric moved against skin. The coat whispered as she shifted it to work. He kept his eyes on the wall and ran through his rules. Keep the door locked. Keep his hands visible when he turned. Stay ready for a panic strike. Speak only when needed. Let her decide distance and pace. He knew how quickly a small kindness could change shape in a room like this. He would not let it. "Why did you look at me like that?" she asked. "Like what?" "Like I'm not trash." "Because you are not." The sounds at the basin slowed and stopped. He heard her breathe. He waited until she spoke again. "You can turn." He turned. She had wrapped the coat tight and tied it at the waist with a strip torn from the old cloth. Her hair was damp and combed by her fingers. Her face was clean, and that small change made her look more like a person and less like a problem a city had decided not to solve. She stood straighter in the coat's square shoulders. Her eyes were clear and hard. "You can sleep on the bed," he said. "I will take the floor." "You are not going to ask for payment," she said. The line was not a test. It was an exhausted line she had said before to other men. "I do not want her dead," he said. "I want you fed and warm. That is the trade I am making." She stepped closer. The collar brushed her jaw. Old marks showed faintly along her neck, the kind that came from rough fingers. She saw his eyes catch on them, then move away. She looked at the weapon on the table. "Former military." "Former scout," he said. "Not anymore. I move boxes and clean old files." "What is in the cylinder?" "Names," he said. "Manifests from evacuation runs. Sometimes registry tags. If it is from this district, your name could be inside." Her hands tightened on the coat. "If my name is there, I can claim water tokens and a clothing ration." "If the system honors it," he said. "Some clerks still do." "Will you check?" "Yes." "In the morning. Sleep first." She looked at the bed again and tested the blanket with her hands. She sat, keeping her legs together, the coat tucked under her thighs. She watched him with a defensive patience that would not drop until she had proof he meant what he said. "Tell me if you want to bolt open," he said. "Some people sleep better if they can leave." "Lock it," she said. "If it is open, someone comes in." He slid the bolt. She turned on her side and pulled the blanket high. He adjusted the stove's damper and lay down on the floor. He put one arm under his head and looked at the ceiling. Cracks spread from the light cage in hard lines. He listened to her breathing. It started shallow and guarded and then lengthened. He waited until the rhythm settled. He sat up, slid the cylinder onto the table, and attached the reader cable. The seal at the base gave under slow pressure. He eased the cover off and fed the cylinder into the port. The reader blinked to life and pulled data in uneven blocks. Text formed on the small screen. Dates, routes, cargo notes, then names. He scrolled until a field opened. The list included a subset labeled Hold Status. He slowed. Halfway down, a single line fixed his attention. Orenia. Status. Unassigned. Notes. Clothing ration denied. Clean water. Token unclaimed. He stared at the words until he felt anger rise in a clean vertical line through his chest. The city had turned her into a note. He marked the entry and stored it to a local file. With this record, he could go to the quartermaster and push for tokens without a bribe. Not every clerk would listen. One of them would. He knew which doors to knock. He knew the words that worked. This was the work he had set for himself since the war ended. He could not repair towers or feed a district. He could restore a name, one at a time, from digits to a person in a room with a locked door. He powered down the reader and lay back on the floor. He kept his eyes open a little longer. He listened to Orenia breathe and felt the room settle into a small, safe shape. He noted his own body, the coil of want in his stomach, the clear picture of her standing bare in the stuttering light, and he put it back behind the door he had closed earlier. One is not a problem. Losing control was. He would not lose it. He planned the morning in a tight sequence. Boil water. Heat the room. Find clothes that would fit. Check the rest of the cylinder. Walk to the quartermaster at first light with the entry saved and the right tone ready. Bring back tokens and a voucher. Bring back a reason for her to believe him. He closed his eyes. He did not pray. He counted the seconds between the stove's ticks and let them carry him into sleep while a single thought steadied and simplified his night. She would not be unclaimed here. Morning broke dim and gray through the cracks in the boarded window, thin light settling across the room in uneven stripes. Gale woke first, the way he always did, body alert before thought caught up. He lay still for a moment, listening. The stove ticked faintly as last night's embers cooled. Pipes creaked inside the wall, and there was another sound, softer, her breathing. Slow, steady. She was still asleep. He sat up quietly and pulled on his boots. His eyes drifted to the bed. Aurenia had curled on her side, clutching the edge of his coat to her chest. The blanket tangled around her legs. Her face, washed clean the night before, looked younger in the pale light. Her lips were parted, her brow faintly creased, as if even in sleep she braced against something. Gale looked away and moved to the stove. He stoked the fire with kindling, set a battered kettle on top, and filled it with filtered water. Steam soon curled from a spout. He opened a ration pack, broke the bar into pieces, and laid them on a plate. It wasn't much, but with hot water and patience, it would be better than the scraps she'd been surviving on. He remembered the way she had torn into the food last night, the suspicion in her eyes, the speed in her hands. Hunger that sharp meant days without. He guessed 4, maybe 5. Behind him, fabric shifted. Aurenia stirred, then pushed herself upright. She sat on the bed, the coat slipping slightly off one shoulder. She caught it and pulled it tighter. Her eyes were on him immediately, wary, measuring. "You stayed," she said, voice rough from sleep. "I said I would," Gale replied. He poured hot water into 2 cups, set one on the table near her. Her gaze dropped to the steam rising from the cup. She wrapped both hands around it, not drinking at first, just letting the heat sink into her fingers. "Most men don't," she said. "Most men aren't me." He broke another ration in half and set it on the plate before sliding it toward her side of the table. She hesitated, then reached out and took it. She didn't rush this time. She ate slowly, watching him as if waiting for a demand to follow. None came. The silence stretched, filled only by the faint crackle of the stove. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "Nothing," Gale said, voice steady. "You needed shelter. Now you have it." Her jaw tightened. "People don't give without expecting something." "I don't trade people," he said. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "You're not a debt. You're not a thing." The words hung in the air. She swallowed and looked down, her silver hair sliding over her face. For a moment, she said nothing. Then, quietly, "I thought I was forgotten, left here to rot." "You were," Gale said. He picked up the reader from the table, tapped it awake. The manifest file blinked open. He turned the screen so she could see, but they kept a record. "Your name's still there. Aurenia, unassigned. Tokens denied. It means the system knows you existed." Her eyes widened, sharp with sudden energy. She leaned forward, fingers gripping the edge of the table. "You found my name?" "Yes." Gale scrolled back to the line. He pointed with one finger. "This isn't much, but it's proof. I can take it to a quartermaster. If I press the right way, they'll issue tokens and clothing rations. It won't fix everything, but gets you back on the books." Aurenia stared at the screen, lips parted. Her breathing quickened. "No one has said my name in months." She looked up at him, eyes bright with something between hope and disbelief. "Why would you do this for me?" Gale didn't flinch from the question. "Because I know what it feels like to be written off. After the war, my name didn't mean anything either. A number in a file, a scout they didn't want to pay anymore. I rebuilt from nothing. You deserve the same chance." Her eyes narrowed, searching him again, trying to spot weakness or hidden hunger. All she found was his calm. She sat back, clutching the coat tighter around herself, trying to process the shift inside her. "What if they refuse?" she asked. "Then I try again," Gale said. "Different quartermaster, different office. Someone will listen. They always do if you push long enough." Silence lingered again, heavier now, but not hostile. She looked down at the cup between her hands, then lifted it to her lips and drank. The warmth spread through her, easing the tight line in her shoulders. She set the cup down carefully, as though afraid breaking it might break the fragile moment too. "You're not afraid of me," she said, her voice quieter now. "Should I be?" Her lips twitched with a humorless half-smile. "Most men see a woman like me as trouble, or as property. I see a woman who's still alive, Gale said. That's not trouble. That's worth something. Her eyes stayed on him a long time. She seemed to want to argue, but no words came. At last, she looked away, tugging the coat tighter, as if hiding both her body and the small spark of relief she couldn't control. Gale finished his cup and stood. I'm heading to the quartermaster. You can stay here. Door bolts from the inside. No one comes in without your say. She blinked. You'd leave me here? You're safer in this room than out there, he said. You lock the door behind me. If I'm not back by nightfall, you decide what to do. But I will be back. Her hands tightened on the coat. Fear flickered in her eyes again, mixed with a hesitant trust. You really think you can put me back in the system? Yes, Gale said. He pulled on his gloves and adjusted the strap of his pack. His voice remained calm, unshaken. And when you are, you won't just be surviving in the shadows. You'll have a claim again, a place, and no one can erase that. He moved toward the door. She watched him the whole way, lips pressed tight, caught between doubt and need. When his hand touched the bolt, her voice stopped him. Gale. He turned, waiting. Don't leave me long. His eyes softened just slightly, the discipline in him giving way for a fraction. I won't. He slid the bolt back, stepped into the stairwell, and pulled the door shut behind him. Inside, Aurenia sat in silence, the coat wrapped around her like armor, her name still burning on the screen of the reader. The stairwell smelled of rust and mold, a narrow shaft where echoes stretched every footstep into suspicion. Gale descended with steady control, boots hitting each step in a rhythm that betrayed no rush, no fear. His thoughts stayed sharp, cataloging what he carried. The data cylinder, the manifest entry, his own name as leverage. He knew the quartermaster's Office 2 districts over still processed old records for scraps of authority. Half the time, they ignored them. The other half, they listened if the proof was undeniable and the tone was right. His mission now was simple: turn Aurenia's forgotten status into tangible tokens before nightfall. On the street level, the ruins of Therion 5 opened in gray daylight. Neon bled from broken signs that had never shut down, humming against the silence of abandoned blocks. Gale moved with purpose through cracked avenues, past husks of shops where shutters rattled in the wind. Stray eyes followed him from doorways and broken windows, measuring him, measuring his pack. He ignored them. His face was calm, unreadable, the posture of a man who looked like trouble if pressed. The quartermaster's station sat inside a reinforced checkpoint left from the last days of organized patrols. 2 guards in patched armor leaned by the door, rifles slung low. They straightened when Gale approached, but didn't bar his path. They recognized the type, ex-military, still carrying discipline, not a vagrant. He pushed through the doors into a stale room lit by hanging lamps. Behind the counter, a quartermaster hunched over a console. He was older, hair thinned and graying, shoulders bent from years of sitting. His eyes flicked up, narrowing at the sight of Gale. We're not issuing new claims today. His voice was flat, rehearsed. I'm not here for new, Gale said, setting the cylinder on the counter. I'm here for lost. The man frowned, unimpressed. Everyone says that. Half the names in this system are corpses. Not this one, Gale said. He powered on his reader, turned the screen, and tapped the entry. Aurenia. Status, unassigned. Notes, clothing ration denied. Clean water, token unclaimed. She's alive. I have her in my shelter. This is her name. The quartermaster's brow furrowed. He leaned closer, scanning the entry. His lips pressed together, and Gale caught the hesitation, the man debating whether this was worth the trouble. Why bother? Women like that slip through every day. No one comes asking. I'm asking, Gale said, tone low and direct. Issue the tokens. The man leaned back, arms crossed. What's she to you? Gale's answer came without pause. A person who survived. The silence stretched. The quartermaster studied him, weighing the resolve in his eyes. Finally, with a tired sigh, he keyed the console, brought up a file, and slid a set of stamped chits across the counter. Water, clothing, 1-month food allotment. No promises next time. It's enough, Gale said. He gathered the chits, pocketed them, and took the cylinder back. As he turned, the quartermaster added under his breath, "Men don't fight for women like her unless they want something." Gale stopped, but he didn't turn. His jaw tightened. He let the words hang, unanswered, then walked out. Back in the room above the stairwell, Aurenia sat with the coat drawn around her back against the wall. The hours since he left had stretched long and sharp. At first, she simply listened to the building, the distant groan of pipes, the faint scratch of rats in the walls. Then came the quiet doubts, louder than any sound. What if he didn't return? What if he sold her name for credit and left her here, another shadow, waiting for nothing? She had tested the bolt 3 times, sliding it back and forth, assuring herself it worked. She paced the room, touched the basin, picked up the folded blanket, then put it down. At one point, she stood in front of the mirror shard propped against the shelf. She pulled the coat aside, looked at herself. The violet skin marked by dirt, the hair tangled despite her efforts, the hollows beneath her ribs. She whispered her name once, under her breath, just to hear how it sounded. It felt strange, as though the word belonged to someone else. When the bolt finally scraped and the door opened, her body went rigid. Gale stepped inside. He closed the door behind him, slid the bolt back into place, and dropped a small bundle onto the table. Tokens, stamped metal chits, real. He met her eyes with calm certainty. "You're back," she said, the words almost a challenge. "I said I would be," Gale answered. He opened the bundle. Water tokens, food allotment, clothing ration. "You're back on record." Her breath caught. She rose from the bed, walked slowly toward the table, and touched one of the chits with her fingertips, as if it might vanish. This is mine. Yes, it's tied to your name." Her knees nearly gave out. She gripped the edge of the table, her lips trembling. "No one's fought for my name before." Gale's voice was steady, but softer now. "Get used to it. I'll do it again if I have to." For the first time, her eyes softened, not just with suspicion, but with something else, something closer to trust. She swallowed hard, the coat slipping slightly from her shoulder, and whispered, "Why me?" He looked at her, no hesitation. "Because you deserve better than what they left you with. And because I can." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It carried weight, the shape of something fragile forming between them. She straightened, pulling the coat tighter, her face still unreadable, but her voice quieter than before. "Then maybe I'm not forgotten." Gale nodded once. "You're not." And for the first time since he found her in the shadows of the terminal, she allowed herself to believe it. The bundle of tokens stayed on the table like proof carved in steel. Aurenia touched them again, as though her fingers needed to feel the edges to believe they existed. Her lips parted as if she might say something more, but no words came. She lowered herself back to the bed, coat pulled close, eyes fixed on the chits. Gale moved about the room with deliberate calm, setting his pack down, checking the stove, refilling the basin with filtered water. He gave her space, but he also made sure she could hear the small sounds of him working, the rhythm that reminded her she wasn't alone. He knew what was circling in her head. She had asked why more than once, and her eyes still searched him for the hidden cost. No matter what he gave her, food, shelter, tokens, she would keep looking for the moment he revealed his price. That was the weight of someone abandoned too many times. He didn't try to erase that fear with speeches. Fear couldn't be argued down. It had to be worn down by consistency. When the kettle hissed, Gale poured hot water into a bowl and dropped in 2 compressed food pouches, waiting as they swelled. The smell of spiced grain and broth filled the room. He carried the bowls to the table. "Eat." Aurenia approached slowly, like she was walking into another trap. She sat across from him, picked up the spoon, and stared at the steam rising. Her hands trembled, but she lifted the spoon and took a small sip. She froze, eyes wide. The warmth hit her tongue and throat. A quiet sound escaped her before she could stop it. She lowered the spoon quickly, embarrassed, as though the simple act of enjoying food betrayed her. "Keep eating," Gale said, his voice calm even. She ate faster then, controlled but urgent, until half the bowl was gone. She caught herself, slowed again, and looked at him. "You really expect nothing?" "I expect you to eat," Gale said. He chewed a spoonful of his own meal, swallowed, and met her eyes. That's all. Her lips pressed together. A silence stretched before she spoke again. What about when the tokens run out? I'll get more, Gale said without pause. And if they stop giving them, then I'll find another way. Her jaw clenched. Why keep doing this? You don't know me. I didn't need to know you to see you starving in the dark. He leaned forward slightly, his tone steady. And I don't need more than that to decide. Aurenia set her spoon down, hands gripping the edge of the table. She wanted to believe him. He could see it. But disbelief fought her harder. She whispered, almost against her will, "Men take. That's what they do. I'm not here to take," Gale said. His voice carried the weight of truth, not performance. "I'm here because I made a choice. You were left behind. I won't leave you." Her eyes held his, searching again, but this time the suspicion cracked. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. She picked up the spoon and finished the last of the broth, slower now, more controlled, as though she wanted to hold on to the warmth a little longer. When the bowls were empty, Gale stood, washed them in the basin, and set them aside. He pulled open a crate and laid a folded set of clothes on the table. Basic, issued gear from old supply runs. Dark trousers, a plain shirt, under layers. These are yours now. Better than the coat alone. Aurenia stared at the clothes. Her throat tightened. She reached out and touched the shirt, fingers brushing the fabric like it might dissolve. "You even found these?" They were sitting in storage for years. No one claimed them. Now they're claimed. Her chest rose with a deep, uneven breath. She took the bundle in her arms and looked at him, nervous again. "Do I change here?" Gale shook his head and pointed toward the door that led to the small washroom he had rigged with a curtain and a second basin. "Privacy. Take your time." She hesitated, eyes flicking between him and the door, then finally stood and walked toward it, the coat still wrapped around her. Gale stayed seated, his gaze on the table. He listened to the sound of water pouring, the rustle of fabric, the pause when she probably checked herself in the shard of mirror propped in the corner. When she stepped back out, she wore the new clothes. The shirt was a size too big, hanging loose, but it covered her fully. The trousers fit well enough, cinched at the waist with a cord. She still clutched the coat in her arms, unwilling to give it up. Her silver hair, damp at the ends, fell over her shoulders, clean now, catching the dim light in strands. For a long moment, Gale simply looked at her, not with hunger, not with pity, but with quiet recognition. She shifted under his gaze, pulling the coat tighter, but this time she didn't look away. "Better?" he asked. She nodded once, voice quiet. "Better." The room fell into silence again, but it wasn't the sharp, distrustful silence of before. It was heavy in another way, filled with questions unspoken. She sat back on the bed, coat draped across her lap, and finally said, "If you can keep your word, then maybe I can keep mine." Gale tilted his head slightly. "And what's your word?" She looked at him, violet eyes clear, vulnerable but steady. "That I'll stay." The statement lingered between them, fragile but real. Gale gave a single nod, nothing more. He didn't press her. He didn't need to. The choice had come from her, and that mattered more than anything else. The night pressed heavy against the boarded windows, the sound of distant wind moving through the ruins. The stove gave off a steady heat, its glow casting faint orange shapes across the walls. Gale sat at the table, working with the data reader, cleaning out fragments from the cylinder's corrupted files. He liked the structure of it. Names, dates, routes. It gave his hand something to do while his mind stayed sharp. Aurenia sat on the bed with her knees drawn close, the new clothes loose around her frame. She still held his coat draped over her lap, as though giving it up would leave her exposed again. Her eyes were fixed on him, unblinking, as if every small movement of his hands, every turn of his head, carried some kind of hidden meaning. She finally spoke. "You didn't touch me when you could have." Gale didn't look up from the reader. "Because you didn't want me to." Her lips pressed together. "How do you know what I want? You don't even know me." "I know fear," Gale said calmly, setting the reader down. He turned his gaze on her, steady and firm. "I've seen it too many times, and I know what it looks like when someone's waiting for the wrong kind of touch." The words landed heavy. She pulled the coat tighter around her shoulders, her throat working. Silence hung between them for a long time. Then, quietly, she asked, "And what if I stopped fearing?" Gale's chest tightened, but his face stayed controlled. "Then I'd still wait, because the choice has to come from you." Her eyes glistened in the low light. She shifted on the bed, sitting straighter. Her hand hesitated at her side, trembling faintly before she lifted it. If I reach for you, would you take it?" Gale didn't move at first. He measured the moment, every detail, the strain in her voice, the way her body was rigid with effort, the way her hand was half outstretched, fragile, testing. He stood slowly, no sudden movements, and walked toward her. When he reached the edge of the bed, he stopped and lowered himself to sit a short distance away. He kept his hands on his knees, visible. "Show me," he said softly. Her fingers shook, then inched forward. It wasn't quick. It was a long, halting path, like every inch fought with memory. When her hand finally touched his, it was barely more than a brush. Her skin was cool, tense. She flinched at her own boldness, as if expecting him to seize her wrist. But he didn't. Gale turned his hand, palm up, and let her decide. Aurenia swallowed hard and placed her palm against his. Their fingers met, pressed gently. Her body shivered, but she didn't pull away. She stared at the contact, her breathing unsteady. "Why is this harder than hunger?" she whispered. "Because hunger doesn't ask for trust," Gale answered. His thumb brushed lightly across her knuckles, not claiming, just present. Her eyes flicked up to his, and for the first time, they didn't carry only suspicion. There was a thin thread of relief there, fragile but undeniable. She leaned closer without realizing it, the coat slipping from her shoulders. "Then don't let go," she said, barely audible. "I won't," Gale replied. His grip stayed firm but gentle, an anchor without force. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was alive, filled with the thudding of her heart, the steadiness of his breath, the first true moment where fear began to lose ground. She closed her eyes briefly, her forehead bowing toward him, and Gale felt the fragile line between survival and trust begin to shift. The room was silent except for the faint hiss of the stove and the uneven rhythm of Aurenia's breathing. Her hand was still in Gale's, her palm pressed against his with fragile insistence, as though the smallest shift might break the moment. He kept his grip steady, firm enough that she could feel him there, light enough that she could leave if she chose. She leaned toward him without seeming aware of it, forehead dipping closer until her silver hair brushed his shoulder. He felt the weight of her nearness, the warmth of her body under the oversized shirt. He stayed still, letting her test the space between them. Her voice came low, almost trembling. "Every time someone touched me before, it was to take, not to hold." She swallowed, her fingers tightening around his. "I don't know how to do this." "You don't have to know," Gale said. His tone carried the same calm discipline he had used 100 times in the field, but softer now, tempered with something human. "You just have to choose." She lifted her head slightly, eyes searching his. Her violet irises caught the dim light, wide and uncertain. She studied his face, his steady jaw, the faint lines at the corners of his eyes, the unshaken way he met her gaze. Then her lips parted, her breath shallow. "If I chose, would you kiss me?" Gale's chest tightened. He didn't move yet. He needed her to see the choice was hers. "If that's what you want." The seconds stretched. She exhaled shakily and inched closer, closing the gap herself. Her hand trembled in his, but she didn't let go. Their faces were close enough now that he could feel the warmth of her breath, smell the faint trace of soap from when she'd washed. She stopped just short, hesitation flickering again. Her lips quivered as though she might speak, but instead, she waited. Gale bridged the last inch with controlled restraint, leaning in slowly until his mouth touched hers. The kiss was gentle, deliberate, without force. Her lips were soft but tense at first, pressed tight as if bracing for disappointment. Gale held steady, letting the contact linger, patient. He felt her hesitation ease, the rigid line of her body loosening as she leaned into him. Her hand clutches harder, pulling him close not out of fear, but out of a fragile need. her breathing caught in her throat, then released in a faint sound she couldn't hold back. Her lips parted slightly against his. Gale moved with equal care, deepening the kiss by a fraction. No rush, no demand. Just enough to tell her he was there, fully present. When she finally pulled back, her chest rose and fell quickly. Her eyes stayed closed for a moment, then opened, glassy with the weight of something long denied. "You didn't take," she whispered. "You waited. I told you," Gale said, voice low, steady. His thumb brushed across the back of her hand. "I'm not here to take." She leaned her forehead against his, her body trembling, but now with something different than fear. For the first time, she allowed herself to rest against someone without flinching. "I thought I was broken," she said. "You're not," Gale answered. His free hand lifted carefully, touching her jaw with the backs of his fingers, the smallest of gestures, seeking permission. When she didn't pull away, he cupped her cheek gently, holding her face as though it were something fragile but not ruined. Her lips curved into the faintest trace of a smile, small but real. "Then, kiss me again." He did. This time she met him with less hesitation, her lips yielding to his, her body pressing closer in cautious trust. The kiss deepened, not hurried, not rough, but carrying the weight of every wall she had built and the cracks now running through them. When they broke apart again, the room was different. The silence was no longer filled with suspicion. It carried something heavier, unspoken trust, raw want, and the beginning of intimacy that asked for nothing but choice. Gale stayed close, his hand still on her cheek, his breath steady. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Don't let this be the only time." "It won't," he said, and meant it. The stove's glow burned low, the room dim except for its soft orange light. The kiss still lingered on Arena's lips, a warmth she hadn't expected to feel again, certainly not with safety. Her hand remained locked in Gale's, unwilling to let go, as though the world outside would erase the moment if she broke the connection. He stayed seated close to her, posture steady, every movement deliberate. He didn't crowd her, didn't push forward. His presence was calm, controlled, the kind of weight that made the silence feel safe rather than threatening. He let her breathe, let her decide what came next. Her chest rose and fell unevenly. She turned her head slightly, eyes lowering to the oversized shirt she wore. She pulled at the fabric with nervous fingers, twisting it as if debating whether to retreat into its safety or step out of it. The conflict in her was visible, her shame and fear still strong, but now matched by something else. The need to be seen, the ache to feel like more than the dirt the world had made her believe she was. Her voice broke the silence, quiet and trembling. If I let you touch me, will you still look at me the same way tomorrow?" Gale didn't hesitate. "Yes, because who you are doesn't change with what I touch. It only changes when you want it to." She searched his face for any crack in his composure, any flicker of hidden intent. All she found was the steady calm he always carried. Her lips pressed together, then parted as she exhaled shakily. She slid his coat from her shoulders and let it fall onto the bed beside her. The shirt shifted with the movement, exposing the line of her collarbone, pale violet skin glowing faintly in the firelight. Her hands trembled, but she didn't stop. She took his hand, the one already holding hers, and lifted it with both of her own. Slowly, she placed it against her chest, just above her heart. Her pulse was frantic beneath his palm. Her eyes closed, her head bowing slightly as if bracing for judgment. But Gale didn't grip or claim. He simply let his hand rest there, fingers splayed lightly, feeling the rapid beat beneath her skin. "You're alive," he said softly. "That's all I see." Her throat tightened. She leaned into his touch, letting his hand slide higher to her collarbone, then along the line of her neck. His thumb brushed gently against her skin, tracing the tense edge of her jaw. Her lips parted on a sharp inhale, but she didn't pull away. Her eyes opened again, glistening. "Then keep going." Gale moved slowly, his other hand rising to her waist, resting just above her hip. His grip was firm enough to ground her, but careful, respectful. She tensed at first, instinct flickering through her body, but his stillness kept her from recoiling. He waited until her muscles eased, until she gave the smallest nod. Then his hand moved higher, sliding up her side, feeling the lines of her ribs through the fabric. Aurenia trembled, but didn't resist. She lifted her hands, uncertain, and placed them on his chest, fingers curling into his shirt as though holding on. "I don't want to be used," she whispered. "You won't be," Gale answered. His tone carried no room for doubt. "You'll be wanted." "That's different." Her breath shuddered at his words. She shifted closer, knees brushing his thigh, her body almost pressed against his now. She tilted her head up, seeking his lips again. The kiss was deeper this time, less hesitant. Her mouth opened under his, answering the slow insistence he gave her. She pressed harder against him, letting the restraint between them thin. His hand slid beneath the hem of her shirt, resting on the bare skin of her waist. She gasped softly at the contact, her body jerking in reflex, but she didn't push him away. Her fingers clutched his shirt tighter, pulling him closer. He held still for a beat, giving her time. Her breathing steadied, and she gave another nod, silent but clear. Only then did his hand trace higher, gliding along the curve of her side, the warmth of her skin under his palm. Tears welled in her eyes, not from pain, but from release. She kissed him again, harder, tilting her body into his touch. "Don't stop," she whispered against his lips. "I won't," Gale murmured, his voice low, steady, carrying the promise she needed. Their bodies pressed together, tentative barriers breaking under the heat of trust. It wasn't rushed, wasn't violent. It was careful, deliberate, each touch asking a question, each breath giving an answer. For the first time since he had found her shivering in the shadows, Aurenia let herself be vulnerable, not because she was forced, but because she chose. The night held them, the stove's glow flickering across bare skin and tangled fabric. And in that silence, what began as survival turned into something more, fragile, raw, but real. Morning light seeped through the boarded window in pale strips, softer than the night before. The stove had gone quiet, its embers only a dull glow. Gale stirred awake on the bed, his arm heavy and warm around Aurenia's waist. She was still there, curled against him, her silver hair spread across his chest like a veil. For a long time he didn't move. He listened to the rhythm of her breathing, steady now, no longer the panic gasps of a cornered woman, but calm, settled breaths of someone who finally slept without fear. Aurenia woke slowly, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, confusion tightened her features, the old instinct to brace for what the night had cost her. Then she felt the weight of his arm, the steadiness of his chest beneath her cheek, and she stilled. Her fingers flexed lightly against his shirt, testing if he would recoil now that morning had come. He didn't. Instead, Gale looked down at her, his eyes clear, calm as ever. "You're safe," he said, his voice low, almost gravel from sleep. Her throat tightened. She pushed herself up slightly, resting on one elbow, studying his face in the faint light. She was searching again, searching for that moment where men usually changed. But his expression didn't shift. No shame, no gloating, only quiet certainty. "You still look at me the same," she whispered. "I told you I would," Gale answered. His hand brushed her hair back from her face, slow and deliberate. "Nothing about you changed, except maybe that you trust me a little more now." She exhaled a shaky breath, a small laugh escaping before she caught it. More than a little. For the first time, a real smile pulled at the corner of her mouth. It was fragile, like a piece of her she hadn't remembered she could use. She laid back down against him, eyes closing again, letting the silence linger. He held her there, the room wrapped in calm. When she spoke again, her voice was steadier. "All my life, I thought my worth was only what someone could take from me. Now I feel like I can choose. That's because of you." Gale didn't answer right away. He watched the faint lines of sunlight creep across the floorboards. Then he said simply, "Then keep choosing. Choose to stay. Choose to eat. Choose to live. I'll make sure you can." Her hand found his fingers threading together. "And if I choose you?" His chest rose with a deep breath. He squeezed her hand lightly, but firmly, grounding her. "Then I'll never let you go." The words settled over her like the coat he had wrapped around her that first night. Protective, solid, undeniable. She lifted her head, pressed her lips to his again. It wasn't trembling this time, not fearful. It was certain, slow, and real. When they parted, she rested her forehead against his. "Then I'm yours, Gale." "And I'm yours," he said, not as a claim, but as a vow. The days stretched ahead of them, uncertain and broken like the colony outside. But in this room, there was no more question, no more debt, no more fear of what he might demand. For the first time, Aurenia believed she had a future, and it wasn't in surviving alone. They rose together later, sharing the small breakfast he prepared. She wore the shirt he had given her, the coat tied loosely around her waist, her silver hair damp where she had washed again. She moved differently now, not with the small jerks of someone expecting a strike, but with a measured calm, her body reclaiming space instead of shrinking from it. Gale watched her, quiet pride flickering behind his steady eyes. He didn't need to say anything. She saw it in his gaze, the respect, the want, the permanence of what they had crossed into. As the day began, there was no longer a rescuer and a rescued. There were two people, scarred but alive, holding on to something fragile they had both chosen to protect. The night had burned away doubt. What remained was a bond that would not break. And so the story did not end with survival. It ended with trust, earned, held, and kept. Aurenia was no longer unclean, no longer forgotten. She was seen, she was wanted, and she was his. Forever.